Now, the President's State of the Union focused on winning the future, and that's a good thing. And to prove his point, he hit the road today to show some examples. The president went to Wisconsin, where the Democrats got routed in 2010. He toured a factory that makes energy-efficient lights. He spoke about how government, contrary to what the Republicans say, not only can but has helped create jobs.
In 2004, when Orion moved its manufacturing operations here, I'm told that you just had one employee to oversee the development of the manufacturing floor. One employee. Today you've got more than 250. It's important to remember that this plant, this company, has also been supported over the years not just by the Department of Agriculture and the Small Business Administration, but by tax credits and awards we created to give a leg up to renewable energy companies.
So that's a really good example of what the president talked about last night, how sometimes investment by the government can create jobs and opportunities. Overall, I liked the speech. It was inspirational, it was unifying, and centrist in the sense of being right between the two parties we have right now. And I don't think that that's quite the center of the country, but in this case, I'll take it because some of the warning signs was that he was going to go further right than even that, right? But it turned out that he made some solid progressive cases, which I was very happy about. For example, my favorite here.
I'm asking Congress to eliminate the billions in taxpayer dollars we currently give to oil companies. I don't know if you've noticed, but they're doing just fine on their own. So instead of subsidizing yesterday's energy, let's invest in tomorrow's.
Can we please, pretty please, cut the subsidies out for the oil companies making billions in profits? They're the top companies in the world in terms of profits. Why are we giving our taxpayer money? Can you imagine that? Your paycheck is taking some portion out and giving it to ExxonMobil. How easy a win is that? But apparently the Democrats still haven't been able to get it done. But I like that the president went back to it and he's going to insist on it. I was also pleasantly surprised to see he went back to defending the DREAM Act.
Now, I strongly believe that we should take on once and for all the issue of illegal immigration. And I am prepared to work with Republicans and Democrats to protect our borders, enforce our laws, and address the millions of undocumented workers who are now living in the shadows. Some are the children of undocumented workers who had nothing to do with the actions of their parents. They grew up as Americans and pledge allegiance to our flag, and yet they live every day with the threat of deportation.
Look, the DREAM Act has a majority of Americans in favor, but bringing up immigration is still gutsy. I like it. It was solid. But then there were some of the more disturbing trends we were worried about, like his idea of lowering the corporate tax rate.
I am proposing that starting this year, we freeze annual domestic spending for the next 5 years. Now, this would reduce the deficit by more than $400 billion over the next decade, and will bring discretionary spending to the lowest share of our economy since Dwight Eisenhower was president.
That was actually his little part of the speech on spending freeze on domestic issues. Now, look, there's two concerns there. One, on the spending freeze, you're giving in to Republican talking points saying that, oh, the real problem is spending, whether it's spending on federal employees or elsewhere, when in fact we just gave a $400 billion tax break to the top 1% of the country. So I don't like the framing on that. And on the corporate issue, come on now. He says we're going to take out the loopholes, but you and I know, or I think we know, that because that's what's happened every single time, that those loopholes get right back in there, and at the end of the day, they have a lower corporate tax rate. That sounds right-wing to me, and it doesn't sound like it's right for the country. Look, when you look at it all together, though, if it was implemented just like he laid it out last night, I still would say, okay, all right, you know what? It's further right than I'd go, but maybe I can live with it. And I know a great majority of the country would be behind it. And I don't just think that, I know it. Because look, a CBS News poll showed that a whopping, stunning 91% of Americans like the speech. Now, that's about as good as you can possibly get, especially in a country that is so divided on so many issues. That's basically a home run. So what's the downside? Look, I'm afraid that with a Republican House, all the Democratic priorities he mentioned are going to get voted down. But since the president is with the Republicans on some of their priorities, the conservative policies will easily pass. And in the end, we'll wind up with only the right-wing portion of the speech being implemented. As usual, look, I hope that when I talk about President Obama, and I'm a little skeptical, I hope, and I dearly hope, that I am wrong. But that is unfortunately how I see the politics of this playing out. But I want to get different perspectives on it. So joining me now is Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, great pleasure to have you on here. Do you see my concern that when the president agrees with the Republicans, those become issues that are easy to pass? But when he doesn't, the Republicans kill it in the House?
Well, Jack, let me just say this. I think there were a number of points that the president made yesterday which were exactly right. For example, infrastructure, which is not a sexy issue, enormously important. Our roads and our bridges, public transportation crumbling. We can create millions of good-paying jobs, transforming our energy system, becoming energy independent, reversing global warming and lowering greenhouse gas emissions, all very important. Lowering the cost of college, all very important. Here is my concern, though. I think there are a lot of things that should have been said that the president didn't say at all. For example, I don't think the word unemployment was mentioned. I don't think the word poverty was mentioned. I don't think the word trade deficit and outsourcing was mentioned. And I think if you're going to come up with good public policy, you have to educate the American people and understand where we are as a nation. And the reality is, the middle class is collapsing, poverty is increasing, and the gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is growing wider. And we need to understand that in order to come up with appropriate public policy. So I think there was a lot that should have been said that wasn't said. There were some things that were said were very, very good. Also, he wasn't as strong as I would have liked to have seen him in terms of Social Security. There's going to be a huge attack on the part of the right wing and on part of Wall Street to either privatize Social Security or to cut benefits or raise the retirement age. He said some words which were somewhat comforting but weren't strong enough. Social Security, the reality is not going bankrupt. It's good for 27 years, $2.6 trillion surplus. We must not privatize, cut benefits, or raise the retirement age. I wish he had been a little bit stronger and clearer about that.
All right, Senator Sanders, another word he didn't mention, by the way, or another phrase is middle class. He didn't mention that either. But, you mentioned Social Security, and that is very relevant because I saw a report yesterday saying that you and other senators had to talk the administration out of, including in the speech, cuts on Social Security or raising the Social Security age. What's the truth to that?
Well, I wrote him a letter, and we were very public about it. There was a lot of speculation, as I think many viewers are aware, that the president was willing to cut Social Security or raise the retirement age or do some of the things that his deficit reduction commission suggested. We wrote to him and said, Mr. President, keep your campaign promises. You promised to defend Social Security. You promised to, in fact, fight to do away with the cap on upper income earners so that we can strengthen Social Security and make it viable and fiscally strong for the next 75 years. So to answer your question, I guess we should be happy that he did not come out with a position which talked about cuts. But in fact, when he talked about trying to develop a bipartisan solution with Republicans on Social Security, that makes me nervous because I've not heard any serious or positive statements by Republicans on Social Security.
I want to follow up on that real quick, Senator Sanders. On the issue of Social Security, he said we're going to strengthen Social Security. Now, you're right, he didn't talk about raising the retirement age. That's a good thing. But does that, you mentioned it makes you nervous. Is that still out there? Is there still a chance that the president's going to come out and say, oh, the Deficit Commission was right, the Republicans are right, let's raise the retirement age?
No, I don't think that's the way it will shake out. What may happen is the Republicans, as usual, will be very, very aggressive. and they will come up with a position that says, well, you know, we have to raise the retirement age to 70. Well, we have to cut benefits by 25% for younger workers. And his position may be, well, you know, I had to reach a compromise. It wasn't my idea, but I had to work out something with the Republicans. You know, you remember the only point where he was really strong last night, he said, I will veto any legislation which has earmarks. Well, I disagree with that, first of all, but second of all, earmarks not going to drive up the deficit one nickel more. That's not additional spending. He did not say that if the Republicans bring forth legislation or legislation is passed that's going to cut Social Security, I'm going to veto that. I would have liked to have heard that. In terms of trade also, I mean, the president, I have to say this, keeps talking about these trade agreements, which most Americans understand now, whether it's NAFTA or permanent normal trade relations with China, have not worked. Cost us millions of good paying manufacturing jobs. So, to my mind, some of the speech was good, but there was a lot that was unsaid. And based on the agreement that he reached with the Republicans on taxes, which continued the indefensible tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires, I get a little bit nervous.
Senator Sanders, I want to go back to one thing here, and I agree with you. The parts of the speech where he was strongest or most adamant were the Republican positions, like banning earmarks, etc. And on the others, he seemed more negotiable. So that goes to the original question. How do you get Democratic priorities through when you have that Republican House? And really, I don't know the answer to that, and that's part of why I asked you.
Well, here's the answer. This is what I think the answer is. Number one, we need the president to be very strong. I think if the president gets up tomorrow and says, you know what, hey, let me be very clear. We ain't cutting Social Security. We're not privatizing it. We're not raising the retirement age. End of discussion. You'll have the vast majority of the American people saying, thank you very much, Mr. President. But on all of these issues, if you go to the American people and you say, tell me, does it make a lot of sense to do as the Republicans want, to give huge tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires, and then cut back programs for low or median income, middle income people? Vast majority of the people will say no. So we need the president to be out there mobilizing the American people and stiffening the resistance of people in the Democratic caucus to say, we're with you, Mr. President. You take out that veto pen and we'll be there.
Well, I happen to agree with you, Senator Sanders, so I hope you keep sending him those letters, and I hope they keep working. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you very much, Cenk.
All right.